The nuns get pregnant one by one, and the truth shocks everyone. Hello everyone, enjoy these relaxing moments while you watch. The St. Augustine Abbey, nestled deep in a remote mountainous region of the United States, had long been known for its strict discipline and unwavering devotion. The nuns there dedicated their entire lives to prayer, adhering to God's commandments without any contact with the outside world, except for permitted charitable work. Everything proceeded in sacred order until the morning of March 12, 2019, when the real nightmare began. The chapel bell rang, signaling the morning service. The nuns, dressed in simple black habits, silently entered the rows of wooden pews, their eyes lowered in prayer. Mother Superior Catherine Walsh stood before the altar, her gaze stern yet filled with love. But just as she began reciting the prayers, a sharp gasp broke the silence. Sister Emily Carter, only 22 years old, suddenly collapsed. The entire abbey was thrown into shock. Sister Emily Carter, another nun, Sister Margaret Doyle, rushed forward in panic to support her. Sister Emily Carter was pale, her breath labored, one hand clutching her stomach as if in pain. The other nuns murmured anxiously, some rushing off to seek help. Mother Superior Catherine Walsh quickly stepped forward, her face etched with worry. "Take her to the infirmary immediately. Sister Rachel Monroe and Sister Laura Hayes." Sister Rachel Monroe and Sister Laura Hayes promptly assisted Sister Emily Carter, guiding her away as the rest of the nuns whispered in concern. Everyone sensed that something was terribly wrong, but no one dared to say it aloud. Half an hour later, Dr. Alan Whitmore, the physician summoned by the abbey, emerged from the infirmary. He was a middle-aged doctor with years of experience working with churches and abbeys. But today, his face was ashen, as if he himself couldn't believe what he was about to say. Mother Superior Catherine Walsh. Dr. Alan Whitmore hesitated, then lowered his voice. "Sister Emily Carter shows signs of pregnancy." Mother Superior Catherine Walsh froze. "That's impossible," she spoke slowly, her eyes turning cold. "No one in this abbey could have committed such a sin." "I thought so too," Dr. Alan Whitmore sighed, wiping sweat from his forehead. "But the signs are undeniable. Her belly has slightly protruded, and she exhibits symptoms consistent with pregnancy." The air in the room seemed to freeze. "We must examine all the nuns." Dr. Alan Whitmore continued. Mother Superior Catherine Walsh remained silent for a long time before finally nodding. The news about Sister Emily Carter spread like wildfire, and as the other nuns underwent examinations, the subsequent findings were even more shocking. Not only Sister Emily Carter, but at least 5 other nuns showed similar signs. Mother Superior Catherine Walsh felt as if she were trapped in a nightmare. These young, pure nuns who had dedicated their lives to serving God, how could they be pregnant? No man had ever set foot in the abbey. This was impossible, yet somehow it had happened. Outside the abbey, rumors spread. Some villagers whispered about strange occurrences within the abbey. Stories began to emerge. Some claimed the abbey was cursed, while others, more malicious, suggested the nuns had committed grave sins. The scandal soon reached the ears of Bishop Thomas Caldwell. Bishop Thomas Caldwell was a powerful man with a stern face and piercing eyes. He prided himself on upholding the purity and honor of the church, but he was also known as an unforgiving traditionalist who tolerated no scandals. Upon hearing the news from St. Augustine Abbey, he immediately called an emergency meeting. "This is unacceptable," his voice boomed within the St. Matthew's Cathedral. "We cannot allow a scandal like this to disgrace the church." A young priest, Father Brian Kelly, hesitantly spoke up, "But, Your Excellency, we don't yet know the full story. Perhaps there is something unusual at play here." Bishop Thomas Caldwell narrowed his eyes. "There is nothing unusual, only that these nuns have broken their vows. But if they are innocent, there is no such thing." Bishop Thomas Caldwell interrupted. "We will go to the abbey immediately. If anyone is guilty, they will face due punishment." Several hours later, a procession of carriages arrived at St. Augustine Abbey. As Bishop Thomas Caldwell and his senior clergy stepped out, the atmosphere grew heavy. The nuns stood in rows in the abbey courtyard, heads bowed in fear. Mother Superior Catherine Walsh came forward to greet them, maintaining her composed demeanor, though inside, turmoil raged. "Welcome, Your Excellency," she said in a measured tone. "I trust you have come to uncover the truth." Bishop Thomas Caldwell scanned the group of trembling nuns. "The truth is already clear, Mother Catherine. Now only judgment remains." By the end of the day, news of the scandal at St. Augustine Abbey had spread throughout the entire region. Outside the abbey gates, people began to gather. At first, they only cast curious glances, but soon whispers turned into murmurs, then into anger. "They are sinners," a man shouted. "God will punish these liars." A group of elderly women, once devout supporters of the abbey, now looked upon the nuns with contempt. "We trusted them, and now they have disgraced the Lord." The first stones were thrown at the abbey gates. Mother Superior Catherine Walsh stood on the balcony, gazing down at the screaming crowd. She knew the worst was yet to come. This was only the beginning of the nightmare. The gates of St. Augustine Abbey remained tightly shut, but outside, the crowd continued to scream. Small stones were repeatedly hurled against the wooden gates, producing an incessant thud that was both grating and ominous. Curses and accusations rang out without end. Inside, the atmosphere grew even heavier as Bishop Thomas Caldwell officially ordered the isolation of all the suspected nuns. "From this moment on, no one is allowed to leave the abbey." His voice was cold. "We must uncover the truth." Mother Superior Catherine Walsh stood before the bishop, her hands gripping the hem of her dark robe tightly. "Your Excellency, I believe something is not right." Her voice remained calm but resolute. "We have committed no sin. My nuns could not have done this." Bishop Thomas Caldwell smirked. "Impossible. Then where did these signs of pregnancy come from, Mother Catherine?" Mother Superior Catherine Walsh fell silent, for even she could not explain it. "Begin re-examining every single one of them." Bishop Thomas Caldwell turned to Dr. Alan Whitmore. "This time, no one is to be overlooked." The nuns were gathered into a large hall where they were ordered to undergo medical examinations under the watchful eyes of Bishop Thomas Caldwell and a group of senior priests. Some trembled, trying to pray, but were sharply commanded to remain silent. "Why must we endure this humiliation?" Sister Rachel Monroe, an elderly nun, was on the verge of tears. "We are innocent." Sister Laura Hayes grasped her hand, trying to reassure her, but no one was listening. One by one, they were dragged into the examination room. The youngest nun, Sister Megan Brooks, not even 20 years old, was so terrified that she fainted when the doctor touched her hand. Sister Evelyn Crane sobbed uncontrollably as she was interrogated about something she herself did not understand. "Speak the truth and you will be forgiven," an old priest urged. "But I have done nothing wrong," Sister Evelyn Crane cried. Bishop Thomas Caldwell crossed his arms over his chest, observing from a distance. Every plea from the nuns only convinced him further that they were hiding something. After several hours of examination, 12 nuns were confirmed to have symptoms of pregnancy. When the news leaked outside, the townspeople's rage reached its peak. In front of the abbey gates, dozens of people gathered, carrying banners with horrifying accusations. Sinners of God, we have been deceived, betrayers of faith. Some threw rotten eggs at the gates, while others held torches, threatening to set the abbey on fire. They have defiled the church, a man roared. Bring them out. We demand justice. Inside, the nuns huddled in the chapel, their tears falling endlessly. Mother Superior Catherine Walsh stood before the statue of Christ, her heart heavy. She had tried to protect them, but now the abbey was no longer a safe place. As the mob grew more uncontrollable, Bishop Thomas Caldwell made a ruthless decision. If you confess, things may be more lenient. He scanned the nuns with a piercing gaze. A piece of paper was placed before them. Sign this. Confess that you have sinned. Sister Grace Lanning, a gentle and quiet nun, burst into tears. But we did nothing wrong. Bishop Thomas Caldwell sighed, signaling to another priest. Anyone who refuses to sign will be permanently expelled from the church. This threat struck at the nuns' greatest fear. Some began to waver. Sister Margaret Doyle, trembling, picked up the pen, her tears staining the paper. Don't sign! Mother Superior Catherine Walsh intervened, but it was too late. Some nuns, out of fear, despair, and the terror of being cast out, signed their names. The others, though yet to sign, began to fall into overwhelming panic. That night, but no one could sleep. The nuns were locked in their rooms, forbidden to step outside. Mother Superior Catherine Walsh, who had led the abbey for over 20 years, had never felt more powerless. In the darkness, she heard someone sobbing. I'm so scared, she turned around. It was Sister Megan Brooks, the youngest among them, still trembling from the day's events. What will happen to us, Mother Catherine? She whispered, her voice breaking. Mother Superior Catherine Walsh could not answer. She had no answer. For the first time in her life, she felt as though she had lost faith in justice. While the nuns were drowning in despair, Bishop Thomas Caldwell and his followers were satisfied. Everything is going according to plan. Bishop Thomas Caldwell smiled. Soon we will cleanse this abbey of liars. A priest beside him nodded. The public is on your side. No one believes those nuns anymore. Bishop Thomas Caldwell took a sip of wine, gazing out at the tightly shut abbey gates. He had seized complete control, just one more step. But even in the deepest darkness, a glimmer of hope still flickered. Mother Superior Catherine Walsh still had one last path left. She quietly wrote a letter, carefully sealing it in an envelope before handing it to Sister Rachel Monroe, the only nun still allowed to leave. Take this to Father Michael Hartman, she whispered. Sister Rachel Monroe trembled. Do you think he can help us? Mother Catherine wasn't sure, but she had to try. Because if she didn't, St. Augustine Abbey would be forever stained by a sin they had never committed. Outside the abbey, the crowd grew larger by the minute. The shouts and curses never ceased. The abbey gate shook violently as if it was about to be torn down. Torches blazed in the night, reflecting off the furious faces. Meanwhile, inside the abbey, the atmosphere had never been heavier or more oppressive. The nuns were locked in their rooms, forbidden to leave. Mother Superior Catherine Walsh had been stripped of her authority. Now, everything was entirely in Bishop Thomas Caldwell's hands. The next day, an emergency meeting was held within the abbey grounds. Bishop Thomas Caldwell sat at the central seat, surrounded by a group of senior priests, all wearing stern expressions. We cannot allow this abbey to continue bringing shame to the church, Bishop Thomas Caldwell said gravely. I propose the expulsion of all nuns who show signs of pregnancy. One priest, Father Daniel Ross, hesitated. But could there have been a mistake in the diagnosis? Bishop Thomas Caldwell narrowed his eyes, clearly displeased. A mistake? All 12 of them have the same symptoms. What further proof do you need? Father Daniel Ross pressed his lips together, not daring to speak further. Another priest, Father Anthony Vega, spoke up. I agree. If we don't act swiftly, the church's reputation will be ruined. Bishop Thomas Caldwell smiled in satisfaction. Then it's decided, he declared. All those guilty will be expelled. When news of this decision spread, the mob outside grew even more furious. They lit candles and raised banners with terrifying messages. Expel them all. This abbey no longer belongs to God. They are frauds. The pounding on the gates became more violent. Inside, the nuns trembled. Some prayed in desperate whispers, while others wept silently in fear. Sister Evelyn Crane murmured, "We're going to die here." Sister Grace Lanning held her tightly. God will not abandon us. But even as she spoke those words, she wasn't sure if she believed them herself. That night, a tragedy occurred. Sister Megan Brooks, the youngest of them all, could no longer endure the pressure. There's nothing we can do, her voice quivered. Going to kill us. Sister Laura Hayes tried to reassure her. No, we will find a way. But it was too late. Sister Megan Brooks lunged forward and slammed her head against the stone wall, collapsing to the ground. Sister Megan Brooks, the nun screamed, rushing to catch her. Blood trickled from Sister Megan Brooks's forehead, her eyes blurred. Mother Superior Catherine Walsh stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. Dear God, we cannot let this continue. When Bishop Thomas Caldwell heard the news about Sister Megan Brooks, he showed no sympathy. That was her choice, he said coldly. Father Brian Kelly, the youngest among the council, could no longer contain himself. Do you not see that something is terribly wrong? A nun took her own life because of this oppression. Bishop Thomas Caldwell shot him a sharp, blade-like glance. She was weak, and the weak have no place in the church. Father Brian Kelly clenched fists, but he dared not say anything more. The nuns were locked away in isolation. Less than an hour later, a new order was issued. All the nuns showing signs of pregnancy were confined to a separate room, forbidden from communicating with anyone. The door was bolted shut. Darkness swallowed them whole. Sister Margaret Doyle whispered, "They're treating us like criminals." Sister Rachel Monroe bit her lip. "We are not guilty." But no one listened. Even in such a dire situation, Mother Superior Catherine Walsh refused to give up. She knew there was only one person who could help them, Father Michael Hartman. But how could she reach him? That night, she called Sister Rachel Monroe over. "You're still allowed outside, aren't you?" Sister Rachel Monroe nodded. "Take this letter to Father Michael Hartman. Don't let anyone see you." Sister Rachel Monroe took the letter, fear tightening in her chest. If she was caught, they would face severe punishment. But they had no other choice. Sister Rachel Monroe slipped outside, crossing the Abbey courtyard where guards patrolled the grounds. She trembled, her heart pounding. A light flickered. A priest was approaching. Sister Rachel Monroe pressed herself against the wall, holding her breath. The figure passed by, unaware of her presence. She continued running, reaching the side gate, slipping through the narrow opening and vanishing into the night. She had to find Father Michael Hartman because this was their last chance to be saved. Darkness engulfed St. Augustine Abbey. The angry chants of the crowd outside still echoed through the thick stone walls, mingling with the howling wind. Fear seeped into every corner. But in a hidden passage, Sister Rachel Monroe was running. She clutched Mother Superior Catherine Walsh's letter tightly, her heart pounding. One small mistake and she would be caught. Then their last hope would be lost forever. Slipping through the side gate, she followed the narrow path leading toward the nearest village of Millersville, a small town near Asheville, North Carolina, where Father Michael Hartman often visited. But just as she stepped beyond the abbey walls, a voice called out behind her, "Where are you going, Sister Rachel Monroe?" Sister Rachel Monroe froze and turned around. A figure stood under the moonlight. Father Anthony Vega. Father Anthony Vega was one of the priests in the church council. He was not as ruthless as Bishop Thomas Caldwell, but neither was he brave enough to openly oppose the bishop's authority. Sister Rachel Monroe swallowed hard, trying to stay calm. "I just needed some fresh air," she said carefully. Father Anthony Vega narrowed his eyes and stepped closer. "At a time like this?" His voice carried suspicion. "I think you're carrying something." Sister Rachel Monroe took a step back, gripping the letter tightly. "Please, Father, don't stop me," she pleaded. Father Anthony Vega sighed, locking eyes with her for a brief moment. His gaze no longer held suspicion, only hesitation. "You're going to see Father Michael Hartman, aren't you?" Sister Rachel Monroe stiffened. She couldn't lie. After a tense silence, Father Anthony Vega suddenly turned away, his voice low. "Go." Sister Rachel Monroe was stunned, but there was no time to ask questions. She bowed her head in gratitude, then ran swiftly into the night. Inside the abbey, Mother Superior Catherine Walsh had been completely isolated. Her room was guarded day and night. No one was allowed to see her. Bishop Thomas Caldwell wanted her silenced because he knew she was the only one still resisting him. Father Brian Kelly, the youngest priest in the council, secretly found a way to meet her. When he slipped into Mother Catherine's room, he spoke quickly. "Mother Superior, Bishop Thomas Caldwell has convinced nearly the entire council. If no miracle happens, you will be removed from your position." Mother Catherine nodded, but her eyes remained steadfast. "Have faith in the truth, Father Brian Kelly. Justice is not dead yet." Father Brian Kelly pressed his lips together as if he wanted to say more, but in the end, he left in silence. The next day, in a public gathering at the Abbey, Bishop Thomas Caldwell officially denounced Mother Catherine in front of all the nuns and priests. Standing on the elevated platform, his voice was sharp as a blade. "Mother Superior Catherine Walsh's weak leadership has brought chaos to this abbey." Mother Catherine was forced to stand before everyone, but she remained calm and composed. "I do not believe my nuns have done anything wrong," she declared firmly. Bishop Thomas Caldwell scoffed. "Then tell me, Mother Catherine, why do they all show signs of pregnancy? Can you explain that?" Mother Catherine remained silent. She had no proof, but she knew something was deeply wrong. "If you have any honor left," Bishop Thomas Caldwell continued, "you will admit your failure and leave this abbey." The nuns wept silently, but none dared to speak out. The truth was, Bishop Thomas Caldwell had nearly won. Inside the abbey, some nuns began to favor Sister Laura Hayes, whispered to Sister Evelyn Crane. What if Bishop Thomas Caldwell is right? Sister Evelyn Crane's eyes widened. "What are you saying?" "I mean, if some nun had broken their vows, then maybe." Sister Evelyn Crane grabbed Sister Laura Hayes' hand tightly. "Listen to me. Don't let yourself be deceived. This is not our fault." But doubt had already taken root. Bishop Thomas Caldwell had achieved his goal. He didn't need the nuns to confess. He only needed them to doubt themselves. 3 days later, the church council made its final decision. All 12 nuns were to be expelled from the abbey, never to be accepted into any religious order again. "They will be cast out tomorrow," Bishop Thomas Caldwell announced. Some nuns burst into tears. Some prayed, but no one could change anything. Mother Superior Catherine Walsh closed her eyes and whispered, "Lord, please save us." But no miracle occurred. In a small village 20 miles from the abbey, Father Michael Hartman read the letter from Mother Superior Catherine Walsh. When he reached the last line, his face turned pale. "My God," he whispered. Sister Rachel Monroe trembled as she stood before him. "Do you believe us?" Father Michael Hartman lifted his head, his eyes sharp. "I believe." He stood up, determination flashing in his eyes. "We must save them before it's too late." That night, while the nuns were locked in their rooms, the abbey gates tightly shut, and Bishop Thomas Caldwell reveling in his victory, Father Michael Hartman set out for St. Augustine Abbey. But would he arrive in time to prevent the tragedy? Dawn at St. Augustine Abbey did not bring the usual peace. On the contrary, it signaled a catastrophe. Today was the day of judgment. 12 nuns were forced to leave the abbey, never to return, never to receive the protection of the church, and would have to face the fury of the outside world. They had nowhere to go, no one to protect them, and worse, their honor had been completely trampled. The chapel bells tolled not to call for prayer, but to announce the execution of the honor of these innocent nuns. Bishop Thomas Caldwell stood at the abbey gate, hands clasped like a judge, looking down at those being escorted out. "You have betrayed God, betrayed the church," his voice rang out. "Now it is time for you to pay the price." Mother Superior Catherine Walsh was forced to watch. Despite having done everything in her power to stop this decision, she could not believe the church was allowing this to happen. Sister Evelyn Crane sobbed, clutching her habit tightly. "We have done nothing wrong. Please let us explain." Bishop Thomas Caldwell ignored her. "Please, you had your chance to confess, but you chose defiance." He gave a signal. The abbey gates opened. Outside, a crowd had already gathered. As the nuns stepped beyond the gate, a storm of rage. "Corrupted! Traitors! God has cursed you! Get out of here!" Stones were thrown. Sister Margaret Doyle threw herself in front of Sister Megan Brooks, but a rock struck her shoulder hard, causing her to collapse. Mother Superior Catherine Walsh hurried forward, shielding her nuns. "Stop! They're innocent!" But no one listened. A man splashed dirty water at them. An elderly woman who once revered the abbey now spat on the ground. "I used to believe in you, but you are nothing but frauds." Sister Evelyn Crane choked on her sobs, looking back at the abbey one last time. They had lost everything. Amid the chaos, Bishop Thomas Caldwell smiled in satisfaction. He had won. He had removed those who stood in his way, proven his power, and taken complete control of the abbey. Father Brian Kelly, the only one who dared to challenge him, stood frozen. "Do you feel no shame?" he whispered. Bishop Thomas Caldwell glanced at him and scoffed. "Shame? I just saved the honor of the church." In the depths of despair, a figure appeared in the distance. Father Michael Hartman had arrived. Sister Rachel Monroe, who had risked everything to deliver the letter to him, pressed herself against the gate, eyes filled with hope. But would he be in time to stop this tragedy? Father Michael Hartman strode toward the crowd, but Bishop Thomas Caldwell's soldiers blocked his way. "I need to speak with the bishop immediately," he demanded. But the soldiers did not move. Father Michael Hartman was stopped right at the gate, as the innocent nuns were thrown out of the abbey like criminals. 12 nuns were cast onto the streets with no one to protect them. Bishop Thomas Caldwell ordered the abbey gates to be shut as if erasing their existence forever. Sister Megan Brooks trembled, her eyes filled with panic. "Where will we go?" Mother Superior Catherine Walsh held her hand tightly. though she too was filled with uncertainty. "I don't know, but I will not leave you alone." They began walking under the contemptuous gazes of the villagers. Though blocked, Father Michael Hartman did not give up. He stared intently at the tightly closed abbey gate, then turned to the soldiers. "This is a mistake." His voice was low, but full of authority. No one responded, but some of the soldiers began to waver. They had witnessed too much injustice, and in their hearts, their faith in Bishop Thomas Caldwell was no longer absolute. Father Michael Hartman turned away, but his eyes burned with determination. He had a plan. Mother Superior Catherine Walsh and the nuns walked for several hours, no one uttering a word. When that night fell, they found a small forest outside the village. "We will sleep here tonight," Mother Catherine said. Sister Margaret Doyle held Sister Megan Brooks close, both shivering from the cold. Sister Evelyn Crane looked up at the sky, silent tears streaming down her face. They had lost everything, but they still had each other. Meanwhile, inside the abbey, Bishop Thomas Caldwell was confident that everything was over. He sat at his desk, pouring himself a glass of wine, savoring his victory. But he did not know that within just a few days, a horrifying truth would be exposed. A cold wind swept through the forest where the 12 nuns were taking refuge. They huddled together, curling up beneath their thin habits, but the chill of the night was nothing compared to the pain and humiliation they were enduring. Sister Evelyn Crane clutched her arms, trying to retain warmth, but her voice still trembled. "We can't live like this forever. Always running?" Mother Superior Catherine Walsh looked at her nuns. The faces that were once full of faith were now hollow, confused, and afraid. "I know," she said softly, yet her gaze remained resolute. "We will find the truth." But she also knew that without a miracle, they would never have the chance to return to the abbey. Meanwhile, at a small church in the neighboring village, Father Michael Hartman hastily flipped through an old medical book. He turned the pages with intense focus. Sister Rachel Monroe sat across from him, her hands clenched tightly together. "Have you found anything?" Father Michael Hartman did not respond immediately. He turned another page, then suddenly stopped. His eyes widened. "Here it is!" Sister Rachel Monroe leaned closer. "What did you find?" Father Michael Hartman tapped a line of text on the page. "All the symptoms the nuns experienced are not necessarily signs of pregnancy." Sister Rachel Monroe's eyes widened. "Then what does that mean?" Father Michael Hartman took a deep breath, his voice lowering. "They could be the result of an artificial hormone." Sister Rachel Monroe froze, her heart pounding. "Are you saying someone deliberately poisoned them?" Father Michael Hartman nodded slowly. "We need to re-examine the test samples, but I believe this is a conspiracy." That very night, Father Michael Hartman secretly met with a doctor he trusted, Dr. Samuel Green, an honest man who was not under the church's influence. Dr. Samuel Green carefully reviewed the symptoms of the nuns once again. After a moment of deep thought, he looked up, his expression grave. "You were right, Father. These signs are not from a natural pregnancy." Father Michael Hartman felt a chill run down his spine. Could it be? Dr. Samuel Green nodded slowly. "If we test their blood, we might find evidence, but I need a blood sample from at least one of the nuns." In the forest, Mother Superior Catherine Walsh listened to Father Michael Hartman's words as Sister Rachel Monroe recounted them. She narrowed her eyes, her heart heavy. If they had truly been poisoned, who had done it, and for what purpose? But now the most important thing was proving the truth. "I will go," Mother Catherine said firmly. Sister Margaret Doyle gasped. "Mother Catherine, but what if they capture you? If I don't go, we will never be vindicated. Father Michael Hartman secretly arranged for Mother Catherine to slip into the village under the protection of the townspeople who still believed in the abbey. They wrapped her in a thick cloak, concealing her habit before leaving. Mother Catherine held her nun's hands tightly. "Pray for me." Sister Evelyn Crane sobbed, embracing her. "May God protect you." Mother Catherine nodded, then turned and walked into the darkness. At the abbey, Bishop Thomas Caldwell was beginning to suspect that someone was working against him in secret. It seems someone has yet to submit. He stared intently at Father Brian Kelly, the only one who dared to oppose him. "Do you have something to say to me?" Father Brian Kelly remained silent, but within him, a fire had begun to burn. When Mother Catherine arrived at Dr. Samuel Green's house, she felt her heart pounding faster than usual. The doctor looked at her seriously, then gestured for her to enter. "I need to take a blood sample." Mother Catherine nodded and extended her arm. As the needle pierced her skin, she closed her eyes and prayed, because she knew that if this was discovered, they would not get a second chance. At the abbey, Bishop Thomas Caldwell suddenly felt uneasy. "Find Mother Catherine immediately." His soldiers spread out, searching for her everywhere, but by the time they reached the forest, she was already gone. 3 days later, the blood test results arrived. Father Michael Hartman held the paper in his trembling hands. Dr. Samuel Green took a deep breath, his voice heavy with seriousness. "None of them are pregnant." Sister Rachel Monroe's mouth fell open. "Then what are those symptoms?" "They were caused by a hormone that was introduced into their bodies through food or water." Father Michael Hartman felt his blood turn cold. Someone deliberately did this, and they knew exactly who was behind it all. As Father Michael Hartman read the results, a terrifying thought flashed through his mind. He looked up at Sister Rachel Monroe, his voice lowering. Bishop Thomas Caldwell manipulated everything to gain control of the abbey. Sister Rachel Monroe gasped. "He did all of this just to overthrow Mother Superior Catherine Walsh?" Father Michael Hartman nodded, his eyes burning with anger. "Now that we have proof, we must bring it to light before it's too late." Just as Father Michael Hartman was preparing to return to the abbey, a villager ran up to him. "They are hunting for you." Father Michael Hartman sprang to his feet. Outside, Bishop Thomas Caldwell's knights had arrived, surrounding the village. Time was running out. Bishop Thomas Caldwell's knights had surrounded the village. From the window of the room where Father Michael Hartman was staying, the flickering torches illuminated the soldiers' armor, reflecting in the dark night. Sister Rachel Monroe trembled, clutching the edge of her robe. They came too fast. Father Michael Hartman looked down at the blood test results on the table, a rising sense of urgency filling his chest. "We have to leave immediately. If we're captured, the truth will be buried forever." Dr. Samuel Green nodded quickly, stuffing the crucial documents into a leather bag. "I can help you escape through the back way." Outside, a commanding, cold voice rang out. "Open the door. By order of the bishop, we are conducting a search." They had no time left. Dr. Samuel Green led them to a small door at the back of the house. "This path will lead you out of the village through the Blackwood Pines forest." Father Michael Hartman gave a grateful nod, but before leaving, he grabbed Dr. Samuel Green's hand. "You must leave immediately. If they suspect you, they will not spare you." Dr. Samuel Green furrowed his brow, but understood the real danger. "I will head south." "Be careful, Father Michael Hartman." There was no time for further words. Father Michael Hartman and Sister Rachel Monroe hurriedly slipped through the garden, vanishing into the darkness. Just as they disappeared, the front door was shattered. The knights stormed inside, their eyes filled with menace. Dr. Samuel Green, are you harboring anyone? Dr. Samuel Green kept his composure, though his heart pounded wildly. I am merely a doctor. Why are you searching for me? The commander narrowed his eyes, scanning the room, but there was no sign of Father Michael Hartman or Sister Rachel Monroe. They had escaped just in time. At the edge of the forest, Mother Superior Catherine Walsh and the nuns remained hidden. No one spoke. Only the cold wind rustled through the trees, mixing with their silent prayers. Sister Evelyn Crane huddled beside Sister Megan Brooks, whispering, "How long can we survive like this? Always running." Mother Superior Catherine Walsh remained silent. She knew they could not live in the shadows forever, but returning would mean capture or worse. Suddenly, footsteps echoed in the distance. Everyone tensed, ready to flee. But then a familiar voice called out, "Mother Catherine, I bring news." Sister Rachel Monroe emerged from the darkness, followed closely by Father Michael Hartman, exhausted but his eyes blazing. Mother Superior Catherine Walsh rushed forward, gripping Father Michael Hartman's hands. "Did you find anything?" Father Michael Hartman didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pulled the blood test results from the leather bag. "They are not pregnant." The nuns gasped, unable to believe their ears. But why did we have those symptoms?" Sister Margaret Doyle stammered. Father Michael Hartman tightened his grip on the paper, his voice grim. "Someone introduced hormones into your food and water. This was a conspiracy." Stunned silence fell over the group. Mother Catherine inhaled deeply, steadying herself. "Then who is behind it?" Father Michael Hartman met her gaze. "Bishop Thomas Caldwell." Meanwhile, at St. Augustine Abbey, Bishop Thomas Caldwell remained at ease, as if his victory was already secured. Father Brian Kelly, though fearful, decided to confront him once more. "You have gone too far," he said, his voice shaking with anger. "You have destroyed an entire abbey for your own ambition." Bishop Thomas Caldwell chuckled coldly. "You are too naive." Father Brian Kelly clenched fists, but Bishop Thomas Caldwell was too powerful to overthrow alone. Without proof, there was nothing he could do. In the forest, Mother Superior Catherine Walsh made her decision. She would confront Bishop Thomas Caldwell. "We must return," Sister Megan Brooks gasped. "But what if they capture us?" Mother Catherine looked around, her gaze unwavering. "We have evidence. If we do nothing, evil will triumph." Father Michael Hartman nodded. "I will go with you." They had steeled themselves for the final battle. As soon as Mother Catherine and Father Michael Hartman stepped out of the forest, one of Bishop Thomas Caldwell's soldiers spotted them. His eyes widened in alarm, and he wheeled his horse around, galloping back toward the abbey at full speed. "Inform the bishop, they've returned." The next day, in front of St. Augustine Abbey, tension filled the air. Bishop Thomas Caldwell stood on the abbey steps, hands clasped together, looking down at the nuns he had exiled. Mother Catherine stepped forward, her eyes locked on his. "I know what you have done, Bishop Thomas Caldwell." Bishop Thomas Caldwell raised an eyebrow, but maintained his calm demeanor. "Oh, and how do you intend to prove that?" Father Michael Hartman held up the blood test results, his voice echoing, "We have proof." The crowd murmured, and the senior priests exchanged glances. A chill ran down Bishop Thomas Caldwell's spine. He knew the game had changed. Father Brian Kelly, who had been silent until now, suddenly stepped forward. "If you are innocent, allow the church council to verify the truth." Bishop Thomas Caldwell said nothing because he had no way out. Darkness had shrouded the abbey for too long, but now light was beginning to shine through. St. Augustine Abbey, once a symbol of sanctity and reverence, now stood at the center of a storm of justice and truth. Mother Superior Catherine Walsh stood at the gates, facing Bishop Thomas Caldwell, the man who had exiled her and her nuns. But this time, she was not alone. In Father Michael Hartman's hands was undeniable proof. "We have test results proving that the nuns were never pregnant," Father Michael Hartman declared. "They were poisoned with an artificial hormone." The entire abbey fell silent. The senior priests exchanged weary glances, doubt creeping into their expressions. Father Brian Kelly stepped forward, taking the results from Father Michael Hartman's hands. "If this is true, then who poisoned them?" Father Michael Hartman stared directly into Bishop Thomas Caldwell's eyes. "You already know the answer, Bishop Thomas Caldwell." Bishop Thomas Caldwell was not one to surrender easily. He scoffed, his voice dripping with contempt. "How absurd! You are weaving a ridiculous tale to defend these sinful nuns." Mother Superior Catherine Walsh stepped forward, her eyes sharp as a blade. "If they are guilty, let an independent doctor examine them. If you have nothing to hide, what are you afraid of?" Bishop Thomas Caldwell was momentarily speechless, but he quickly composed himself and turned to the senior priests. "This is a farce. We cannot trust a test conducted by an unknown doctor." At that moment, Dr. Samuel Green, the man who had conducted the tests, stepped forward from the crowd. "I am Dr. Samuel Green. I examined the blood samples of these nuns, and I swear before God that they are innocent." A murmur of shock rippled through the priests and the gathered townspeople. Those who had thrown stones and cursed the nuns began to waver. A man whispered, "Could we have been wrong?" An elderly woman covered her face, her voice breaking. "I cursed them. I cursed innocent women." Another priest, Father Daniel Ross, turned to Bishop Thomas Caldwell, his gaze filled with suspicion. "Your Excellency, if you have nothing to hide, allow an independent medical council to verify the results." Bishop Thomas Caldwell clenched his fists, though his face remained composed. "I have nothing to prove." "Then what are you afraid of?" Father Michael Hartman asked coldly. Bishop Thomas Caldwell did not answer. He knew the tide was turning against him. At that moment, a voice rang out from the gate. "I can provide more evidence." All eyes turned toward the figure emerging from the shadows. A young priest stepped forward. It was Father Anthony Vega. Bishop Thomas Caldwell's eyes widened in shock, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. "You," he growled. Father Anthony Vega walked up, pulling out a small notebook and raising it high. "This is the record of a doctor who worked with Bishop Thomas Caldwell. It clearly documents how he ordered hormones to be introduced into the abbey's food supply." A ripple of shock spread through the crowd. Mother Superior Catherine Walsh felt her heart pounding in her chest. Bishop Thomas Caldwell took a step back, his face turning pale. "You're lying!" he roared. But Father Anthony Vega stood firm. "Check the signature inside, and you will know the truth." Father Brian Kelly took the notebook, his eyes widening as he saw the official church seal. This is real evidence." Now even the priests who had sided with Bishop Thomas Caldwell could no longer hide their astonishment. Seeing everything collapse around him, Bishop Thomas Caldwell knew he could not stay any longer. He turned and fled, trying to escape through the abbey's back gate. But it was too late. The very people who had once supported him were now enraged. A man stepped forward, blocking his path. "You will not escape so easily." A mob surrounded him. The same people who had once trusted him now looked at him as a traitor. A stone was hurled at him, then another. Bishop Thomas Caldwell fell to the ground, shoved and cursed. The church's knights rushed in to intervene, But it was too late. Bishop Thomas Caldwell had already lost all power. 2 days later, the High Church Council convened an emergency session before dozens of senior priests, in the presence of witnesses, and under the burning gaze of Mother Superior Catherine Walsh and the nuns. Bishop Thomas Caldwell was sentenced. "You have disgraced the church and betrayed your sacred vows." Bishop Thomas Caldwell had nothing left to say. "You are stripped of all titles and excommunicated from the church permanently." He stood frozen, unable to believe he had lost everything. The priests turned their backs on him, as if he no longer existed. As Bishop Thomas Caldwell was led out of the abbey, an eerie sense of peace settled over St. Augustine Abbey. Mother Catherine looked up at the sky, silently thanking God. The nuns embraced one another, tears of relief streaming down their faces. For the first time in weeks of living in fear, they felt truly protected. But the most important task was still unfinished. The abbey had to be restored and their honor fully redeemed. Their story was not over yet. Bishop Thomas Caldwell was dragged out of St. Augustine Abbey, his eyes filled with panic and rage. He had never imagined himself in such a position, abandoned by the very church he had served, stripped of his titles, and cast out as a traitor. Outside, the gathered crowd had grown even larger, murmurs and whispers echoing through the abbey. A man pointed at Bishop Thomas Caldwell, his voice seething with anger. "He deceived us all!" A woman shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "We believed in him, but he was nothing but a monster." Stones began to fly toward Bishop Thomas Caldwell, just as they once had toward the innocent nuns. He screamed in desperation, "Stop! I am a bishop! I served God!" But no one believed him anymore. The church's knights stepped in, shielding Bishop Thomas Caldwell from the mob, not to save him, but simply to remove him as quickly as possible, to erase his influence forever. A senior priest delivered the final verdict. "Bishop Thomas Caldwell, you are stripped of all ranks and banned from entering any abbey across the entire territory. From this moment on, you are no longer a part of the church." Bishop Thomas Caldwell collapsed to his knees, his lips trembling. "No, this cannot be." But this was the truth. He had lost everything. As Bishop Thomas Caldwell was led away, the abbey gates swung open, freed at last from his corrupt control. Mother Superior Catherine Walsh stood at the entrance, looking at her nuns, the women who had endured so much pain, humiliation, and injustice. Today, they have been vindicated. Father Michael Hartman stepped forward, his voice deep and resolute. "All the nuns of St. Augustine Abbey are innocent. They never betrayed their vows." Silence hung over the crowd. Then a single clap broke through. An elderly woman who had once cursed the nuns now fell to her knees before Mother Superior Catherine Walsh. "Forgive us, we were blind." Mother Catherine looked at her, then at the gathered people, before speaking gently. "Truth has prevailed, but more importantly, we must all learn to forgive." The nuns embraced each other, their tears falling, but they were no longer tears of sorrow, but of joy and relief. 1 week later, the High Church Council convened a special assembly to deliver Bishop Thomas Caldwell's final punishment. In the largest city nearby, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where the church tribunal was headquartered, a secret trial was held. The senior priests, men who had once stood beside Bishop Thomas Caldwell, now turned their backs on him. A cardinal, Cardinal Richard Donnelly, spoke solemnly. "You abused your power to persecute the innocent, dishonored the church, and caused turmoil within the community." Bishop Thomas Caldwell had no strength left to resist. He could neither run nor deny the truth anymore. The final verdict was pronounced. Bishop Thomas Caldwell was permanently expelled from the clergy. All his possessions and privileges were stripped away. He was sentenced to exile in a remote abbey where he would live out the rest of his days in solitude, without power or honor. As the sentence was read, Bishop Thomas Caldwell lowered his head. He knew his life was over. He was no longer a powerful bishop, only a pitiful, broken man. Back at St. Augustine Abbey, the atmosphere had completely transformed. Mother Superior Catherine Walsh walked into the great hall where the nuns stood in a line, their eyes filled with reverence and love. Sister Evelyn Crane ran forward, throwing her arms around Mother Catherine. "We are home again." Mother Catherine smiled. For the first time in weeks, she truly felt at peace. God never abandoned us. Father Michael Hartman stood beside her, nodding. Truth always finds a way to prevail. The very people who had once condemned the abbey now returned with reverence. They came to confess, to pray, and most of all, to seek forgiveness from the nuns they had wronged. A group of women brought flowers, laying them at the abbey gates as a symbol of remorse. A man turned to Mother Catherine and said, "If it weren't for you, the truth would have never been revealed. You are the light that guided us." Mother Catherine smiled, but she knew this victory was not hers alone. It belonged to everyone who had fought for justice. Not long after, the abbey underwent a complete reform. Strict regulations were revised to ensure no one could manipulate it again. Honest and righteous priests were appointed to oversee its governance. The exiled nuns were welcomed back with full honor. Above all, St. Augustine Abbey was no longer a place shrouded in fear, but a symbol of justice and unwavering faith. Mother Catherine looked up at the sky and whispered one final prayer: "We are home." 3 months later, after justice was served, St. Augustine Abbey had been completely transformed. Once a place overshadowed by darkness, fear, and oppression, it had now become a beacon of truth and resilience. The nuns returned to their normal lives, but none could ever forget the nightmare they had endured. Today, a special ceremony was held at the abbey, drawing hundreds of people from all over. A Thanksgiving Mass to welcome the nuns back, to declare that justice had triumphed, and to ensure that the mistakes of the past would never be repeated. Mother Superior Catherine Walsh stood before the altar, dressed in her most solemn habit. Her hands trembled slightly as she looked down at the hundreds gathered before her. The senior priests, the villagers, and the nuns who had been wrongfully exiled all stood together in unity. Father Michael Hartman stepped forward, his voice resonating through the church. "We are here today to thank God for guiding us back to the truth." A chorus of amen echoed from the congregation. Father Michael Hartman turned to Mother Superior Catherine Walsh, his eyes filled with deep respect. "If not for your courage, none of us would be standing here today." Applause erupted, but Mother Catherine simply offered a humble smile. It was our faith that brought the truth into the light. She turned to look at her nuns, the women who had once been treated as outcasts, but now stood tall, their heads held high. Following Bishop Thomas Caldwell's exile, the church had implemented major reforms. A new oversight council was established to prevent anyone from abusing power as Bishop Thomas Caldwell had. Honest priests like Father Michael Hartman, Father Brian Kelly, and Father Anthony Vega were entrusted with protecting the abbey. The nuns were granted more autonomy, no longer subjected to oppressive control. Most importantly, their honor had been fully restored. Not everyone had the courage to face their past mistakes, but today, some did. The woman who had once thrown stones at the nuns stepped forward, her eyes red with tears. She knelt, her voice trembling, "Please forgive us." Sister Evelyn Crane looked at her, remembering that terrible day when she and her sisters were cast out like criminals. She bit her lip, but then turned to Mother Superior Catherine Walsh, waiting for her response. Mother Catherine stepped forward, placing a hand on the woman's shoulder. God teaches us to forgive. Learn from your mistakes, and never again let evil guide your heart. The woman broke down in tears, while others in the crowd bowed their heads in deep remorse. The story of the nuns' resilience spread far beyond St. Augustine Abbey. It echoed throughout America. People from distant places came to the Abbey seeking truth, learning about courage, and understanding justice. The Abbey was no longer just a place for nuns. It had become a beacon of light, a sanctuary where people could come to pray, to seek hope, and to find righteousness. With the church's support, the once exiled nuns were not only welcomed back, but also given compensation for their suffering. They were publicly recognized as innocent and allowed to continue serving God without fear or oppression. The more fragile ones, like Sister Megan Brooks, received mental and physical care after enduring months of trauma. Mother Superior Catherine Walsh dedicated a part of the Abbey to helping oppressed women, providing them with a safe haven. From a place that had nearly fallen into ruin, St. Augustine Abbey had risen stronger than ever. Though no one spoke of Bishop Thomas Caldwell openly anymore, whispers about him still spread. In a remote abbey deep in the mountains, Bishop Thomas Caldwell now lived in isolation. No power, no honor. He was no longer a bishop. There were no sycophants surrounding him, no respect left for him. Day after day, he sat alone, haunted by memories of his once glorious past. Now a nightmare he could never escape. He had lost everything, and no one cared about him anymore. As the sun set over St. Augustine Abbey, it cast a golden glow upon the ancient stone walls. The nuns gathered to pray, not in sorrow, not in fear, but in gratitude. Mother Superior Catherine Walsh looked up at the sky, her heart lighter than ever. We have overcome everything. Father Michael Hartman stepped beside her, nodding, and St. Augustine Abbey will forever be a symbol of justice. They looked at each other, knowing that this battle had been about more than just protecting an abbey. It had been a fight for righteousness, for truth, for unwavering faith. The sky darkened, but this time it was not the darkness of fear, only the peaceful embrace of night. After a just battle, St. Augustine Abbey had been reborn, and justice had prevailed. The story of St. Augustine Abbey stands as undeniable proof that truth and justice will always triumph, no matter the obstacles, no matter the injustice. It teaches us that unwavering faith, courage, and unity can help people overcome even the most oppressive forces. At the same time, it serves as a stark warning about the consequences of power corrupted, proving that those who commit evil will never escape judgment. And finally, it reminds us of the power of forgiveness, allowing society to move forward in the light of truth. If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing heartwarming stories almost every day. We are very grateful for your support. See you soon.